Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Life Coach Labs. I'm your host, Chris Angel, and I'm here today with my friend, Jeffrey Van Dyke. Hello,
hey,
Jeffrey. I love that we get to have this conversation. For me, you have been someone who bridged me from just an intuitive gut feeling of like, I need to do something outside of real estate, which was my background, to something that is pulling me forward. I didn't quite have words for. So this is probably 3 or 4 years ago. I went through your tribal marketing stuff. I was hot on the path of marketing, but so much of the marketing that was available in the market space was, 6 and 7 figure, whatever, stuff that just didn't land for me emotionally and spiritually. And when I found you, I don't even know how I found you, by the way. It might have been a webinar, one of the webinars that you had run Facebook ads for.
Yeah.
The way you spoke of our wounds, like our tribal wounds, and that our wounds have prepared us for our work and the essence of purpose, like all of these things, I was like, oh, ding, 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 ding. Like, this is somebody I need to know. And so since then we've been through your program, we've done some private coaching, but I'm so excited to talk to you a little bit today about leadership, the world of leadership as it relates to life coaches, sort of, let's see where it goes, let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
But thank you for being here.
Yeah. I'm delighted to be here. Ever since we've met, we've been like kin. So
Yeah.
Glad to be part of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for those that don't know you, maybe just a little, nutshell of a history of how you got here doing the kind of work that you do.
Like so many people, I was in corporate.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Microsoft doing training and development. And I had started my spiritual path in my early 20s. I started working with a spiritual teacher I still work with today, 25 years later. And so that was always part of my life. And then, there's sometimes the gig's up and the universe says, okay, time to move into your calling now.
Yeah.
And usually it starts with just knowing like, this isn't it anymore. And I don't know what it is.
Right.
And I went on a date with this guy, James Shank, this restaurateur, and he had a really great restaurant in San Francisco where I used to live. I'm in LA now. And he talked about how this coach asked him these questions about how people are going to experience the restaurant. What kind of conversations are they going to have? How are they going to feel? If they talk about it the next day, what might they say? And from there, I said, great, what's the location? What's the design and decor? What's the price point? Basically building the soul of it first and then building the physicality of it.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated. I mean, it wasn't a romance connection with me and James. We're still friends, but I connected with that idea. And I started talking to everybody I knew. Oh my gosh, I went on this date with this guy who's this thing called a coach. And, say, Jeffrey, you should do that. I'd be like, yeah. All right, next person. I went on this date with this guy who's this thing called a coach. And after like a half dozen of these, it's like, oh, maybe I should do that.
Wow.
So that's, and I went and got trained at CTI and started that, hung my shingle. But really, the origin story is after all of this, because I thought that coaching was my calling and that I was answering my calling by becoming a coach. And I hung my shingle and crickets.
What?
Right?
I'm sure nobody listening would relate to that. What?
No, not a single person.
Yeah.
And like, I didn't know what the hell to do.
Right. And
it was frankly really disconcerting. I mean, it like hurt my heart to go like, and not to mention like I had to cash in stock options to be able to continue to pay rent and like do all that. I went back and did the thing I swore I would never do it again in the world, which is I worked at a restaurant again, which I did in my 20s.
Right. Me too. Yeah, that's brutal.
And I met a guy named Tim Kelly who developed this process called the True Purpose process, and he became my mentor. like in the true sense of mentorship. Like I became his apprentice. He took me under his wings. I was the first person he ever trained in his work. I ended up teaching with him around the world. We opened up a center in Israel together.
Wow.
And you know, I had this opportunity. So he used to do quite a lot of in-person trainings. And I think this is a large part of where I learned leadership, because Tim has a degree in theoretical mathematics from MIT. He was an officer in the Navy and then was 2 people underneath Larry Ellison at Oracle before getting into consciousness work. So interesting guy, right?
When I read his book, I never would have guessed that about him and his background.
Right. Yeah. So both the Navy thing, the mathematic thing, the engineering thing, like he's very specific about how things are done. And like when you lead a training with him, he'll walk into a room and he'll look at the precise orientation of the chairs and how is the room set up. And, you know, if it's set up in this way, it's going to set up this dynamic for leadership. But if it's set up this way, it'll set up the other dynamic, right? Wow. So even just how the chairs are situated is going to change how one and another relate to one another and the leader in the room. So, you know, I really learned a lot about that. And then when I ended up learning his work and started to teach, he would give me like a 90-minute section. Here, you teach this next one, right? And he'd prepare me and whatnot. And I would teach a section. I might set people up to go into dyads or triads or something for a little bit. And then I would go huddle with Tim. And he would be like, all right, so how is it going? And I'd give him my sense of it. And, you know, are you aware that X happened? Was that your intent? If that wasn't your intent, how would you have needed to do X differently to get a different outcome? Do you know what the outcome is that you wanted? Right. So, and then the 15 minutes for the triad would be up and I'd go back and implement what I learned.
Wow.
Over and over and over and over and over.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so I owe so much of my ability to facilitate, a lot of my understanding of leadership, especially of leadership with depth work, from those rooms and those years being in those rooms with Tim.
Wow.
You know, so, and unfortunately, few people get those opportunities. I mean, I really feel, here's a little story. So I just started, once I learned his stuff just floored me. And it made complete sense to me, because basically to find your life purpose, he says, your mind is already asking the question, why would you go to your memory and imagination for the answer? Let's go to something outside of your conscious mind that could know your purpose and tell it to you, which he calls a trusted source. So it could be something internal, your gut, your intuition, your inner knowing, or something external, an ancestor, a spirit guide, God, the universe, whatever works in somebody's belief system. And I love that it's belief system agnostic.
Yeah, right. I love that.
So I had been dialoguing with my guidance since my 20s. I mean, when I picked up conversations with God, I think I was about 28. And I was like, oh my gosh, I do that. I didn't even know it was a thing. I just, you know, I would journal and this voice would talk to me through my fingers. So his work of connecting with guidance, I already had down. I never thought to ask these questions of purpose, right? And he really breaks down purpose into finite detail to get really, really great specific information about who you are and who you're here to serve and the bigger mission.
Yeah.
So, so once I met him, I started showing up at all his trainings, just like, I'm volunteering, you know, like a little puppy dog just showing up, like lapping it up. And he scheduled this one training for a group of like Fortune 500 CEOs. And there was going to be 6 CEOs there. Wow. So small. And as things with CEOs go, 4 of them last minute had to cancel. And so it was just 2 on 2.
Wow.
And still to this day, I don't know why he set the chairs up this way, but they were in a lowercase t across. versus him at the front with 3 chairs in a semicircle in front of him, which would have been the setup for him being the leader.
Right.
In that setup, we were all equals.
Hmm.
And I'm really good at metaphor and analogy. So he would explain things and I'd see their brows furrow occasionally. And I'd be like, oh, well, think about it this way, and offer an analogy or metaphor. And oh, great, blah, blah, blah. And off we go. End of the day, Tim pulls me aside after they leave. And he's like, so, dude, you're showing up as a co-leader, right? And I was like, I guess. But it seems to be working. He goes, no, it's working. I just want to be sure you know what you're doing. I was like, okay.
He wasn't intimidated. He was just pointing it out to you like.
Well, so the next morning he shows up and he's like, all right, so here's the deal. I was a little miffed. Right.
Yeah.
And granted, now in the position I'm in now, I get he like worked hard to get these quote unquote big fish
right.
to enroll in this thing. Right.
Right.
And he's like, I was a little miffed, and I talked to my trusted sources, and they told me that you're the person I've been asking for. I've been asking for someone to take under my wings, someone to train. And they said, you're it. So do you want to be my mentee? And I said, yes. And we shook on it. And that began that journey. So, I worked with Tim for a good number of years. Then I developed a company with a marketer called named Suzanne Falter, who was a big platform building expert at the time. Who knows you? What are you known for, etc.
Yeah.
She was speaking at a Lisa Sasevich conference back in the day. And she said one line that just floored me. She said, your platform is the 1 square inch you drill a mile deep in your market. And the bells went off because suddenly I knew the reason that people had such a hard time committing to a market, their niche.
Yeah.
Which is they were not sure in their bones that this was the right 1 square inch. So they try a little here and a little there, and then they seek this person's expert and do that, and seek that person's expert and do that, never really landing on this is my thing, right? And I can spread my wings here. I can build what I'm called to build here. And without that, it's a world of hurt.
Yeah.
And it's a world of hurt I knew personally. So my trusted sources start talking to me and they're like, yeah, you're supposed to work with her. So I walk up to her. Sometimes I can be naive, maybe, or just like the why not doesn't occur to me.
Sure.
Like once I hear something from my guidance, it's like, of course.
Right.
So I walk up to her. She has all these people in line waiting to talk to her when she's off stage, right? I hang back, wait till everybody kind of dissipates, and I go and say hello. And I'm like, so I think we're supposed to write a book together.
That's great.
She doesn't know me from Adam.
That's great.
And she just looks at me. She's like, I don't do books anymore. They're not profitable. And I'm like, okay, well, I still really feel that we're meant to do something together. So blah, blah, blah. And she kind of brushes me off with a little bit of bluster. And also like, who are you, kid?
Right.
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 So they had a leader's table in the back of the room. And because I was there with Tim, who was another keynote the day before, I was part of his entourage. So what? She sits down, there's a seat next to her. So I just sit next to her. And I get my journal out and I start journaling with my guides. Like, hey, what's this about? And who is this lady? And why did you tell me to meet her? And blah, blah, blah. And I start journaling the answers I'm getting. She starts peeking over my shoulder and reading. And then she goes, ask him this. Right? And she starts feeding me questions and I'm downloading the answers and writing them down. She's like, we need to go outside and talk. And by the end of that weekend, she was like, I'm leading a 3-day thing in Austin and you need to co-lead it with me.
Wow.
And that began that journey. But really what I saw there is once we started working with clients and we'd develop a platform for them, a brand, go-to-market strategy, et cetera, sometimes they'd freak out. Like, oh crap, that could be a multi-million-dollar brand with a underlying question of, am I ready for that? Can I handle it? You know, and one of the things that I know to be true is whenever we 10x our success, we 10x our mess. Wherever the wobble is, it grows in proportion to how quote unquote big our life is and our business is. So if somebody doesn't have something handled, let's say setting boundaries, and you're running a company that is just you and maybe a part-time assistant and you're making 80 grand a year or 30 grand a year or 120 grand, probably at that point, you're probably going to get your butt kicked. But at whatever level, you can deal with fuzzy boundaries and it's not going to kick your butt so much. But if you have a $2 million a year business and you have fuzzy boundaries, it's going to wallop you. Right?
Yeah.
So, and people's systems can feel that. Our own self-preservation, right? It's not logical. We're not recognizing, oh, I'm resisting growing my business or I'm resisting the next level of my leadership in the world because it's going to bury me, right? We say we want it and then we self-sabotage it because our internal self-preservation mechanism says, you're not ready for that. Your life's going to implode if you had that. Right. So part of what I was noticing with people is that pattern. And I would start to interview them about their relationship to power and influence. And invariably, I'd get in touch with their core wounds. Here's what got interesting is Suzanne would work with a client. And she said, oh, I work with so-and-so. Here's the market. Here's the market's craving, blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, Suzanne, I could have told you that. But given who they are and what they went through, of course, it's the market and the market's craving. It's a direct match at a pattern level, right? And so I started thinking, well, gosh, could we reverse engineer this and understand what the pattern of someone's wounds are as the training program for their purpose? And with all the purpose work I did with Tim, I saw that repeatedly, right? Oh, our wounds are the training program for our purpose. Because wherever our hurt is, that's where we're meant to serve from, right? And that's the alchemical process of doing our own healing, getting the gold from it. That's the hero's journey, and then serving from that gold. So from who are my people? What do they need from me? Why am I the one to serve them? How do I talk to them in a way that they really get that I know them? Well, that can all be found in your personal history, particularly your wounds. And that's where I started to develop the work, my body of work around wounds and marketing and leadership. So yeah, that's the story.
Yeah, no, it makes me think of a couple of things. One, so what's most pressing for me is this thought about for life coaches who have, I'm going to make the assumption, if you're a life coach, you've done a lot of personal work. And yet there is some self-sabotaging, I think, a lot of times for life coaches. And we have a vision of what we want to create, not only in lifestyle and revenue from a business, but in impact. And then there's what we're currently doing. And those are different things. There's the vision of it, and then there's the reality of it. And so based on how you're describing it, it sounds like my question is, what's missing? If we're life coaches who have done a bunch of work, personal work, but yet we still are undermining the growth of that work, like what do you see as missing a lot of times for people in the coaching space? Is it just more work, more wounds they haven't excavated, or
just do more work on your wounds? Yay!
What? Come on, I can't do more work. I've done all the work.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh my God. Yeah.
My first intuitive answer?
Yeah.
is that we're trying to do too many things alone.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and it's both the inner work and the nuts and bolts.
Sure.
You know, one of my real superpowers is being able to see all the disparate dots that connect for someone and go, oh, here's what you're up to. Here's the real work. And they go, oh my God, that's me. That's the thing. That's it. I'm like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I'm, when I'm working with somebody, I'm listening to my guidance, I'm feeling into my heart, I'm feeling into the market's craving, I'm listening to what they're saying. And it's like there's all of these ingredients and then they line up. And I go, oh, here's where it is.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot do that for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I suck at it for myself because I cannot be my own mirror.
Yeah.
And none of us can, right?
Yeah.
So I'm such a collaborator at heart. And I think a lot of coaches are. We love people.
Yeah.
But the way the work is set up oftentimes is we're at home on Zoom alone.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Right. And then we do all these self-study courses that all the gurus tell us to buy. And we do those alone.
Right. Yeah, been there. Yes.
Without any feedback, support, mirroring, etc.
Yeah. Right.
And then, and this is the real kicker, and then we go get more support or deeper support, right? A higher level mastermind, right? Spending at levels we've never spent at, maybe, for our professional development and personal development. And we do it with what I call competitors versus creators. So a lot of the marketing world is based on the marketing designed to sell product, not service, for one, to move, right? To move widgets. And I'm holding, my Soda Stream bottle here.
Yeah.
And it's based on commodities, which is you got to do it faster, better, right? Cheaper. Right. Those are basically like the three levers. And so we're all sitting there trying to prove to everybody, hey, we do it faster, better, cheaper, buy from us. But then again, everybody else says the same damn thing, right? And so all of it is a race to the bottom in the world of competition, in my experience, usually. And so a lot of marketers that people work with are not looking at who are you uniquely. Who, I'm going to use my own personal language here. This may need to be translated for certain listeners, right? But personal language, what's the ministry or mission behind the work? What's the why of it? How are you trying to move the needle in the world and in people's lives? And rather than trying to compete in the market, I believe our role is to create markets. I don't know where I put it. I mentioned I interviewed Elizabeth Lesser earlier today on my podcast, who is the founder of the Omega Institute. In her book, Cassandra Speaks, which is about women in power. She tells this story about meeting this lady who told her the story about Cassandra, this mythical character. And she says in the book, she gave me an answer to a question I didn't even know I was asking. She gave me an answer to a question I didn't even know I was asking. And I feel like for people that do depth work or transformational work, oftentimes what we have is an answer to a question our people don't even know they're asking. And so when we go to marketers who try to have us compete, they go, well, you can't talk about that. That's not marketable. Give them what they're, sell them what they want, give them what they need. One of my most
I hate that. Yes.
Let's just get some acid reflux going there.
Right.
And so
Mhm. Mhm.
And then we try to do it because they say that that's the only way. And we feel like we're selling our soul in the process, and we are, but
Mhm.
we don't seem to have an alternative. So we don't know what else to do.
Right.
And then either one of two things happen. Either we never execute on it because it never feels right.
Yeah.
Or those of us that have that particular kind of drive and will, and like, I will do it, right?
Mhm.
We'll execute on it and end up building something that's not ours to build.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
I had I had somebody years ago come to me who built a coaching program and company around coaching singles, around dating.
Mm.
And she came to me and she said, Jeffrey, I've been happily married for 25 years. She says, I haven't dated in decades.
Uh-huh.
We didn't even have computers when I started dating, let alone online dating,
Mm.
let alone apps. Like I don't know anything about what it's actually like for people. She felt like such a fraud.
Yeah.
She'd built a list of like 3,500 people.
Wow. Wow.
Uh,
Wow. Wow.
she was making money
Yeah.
and hating it because somebody told her, oh, well, that's a viable market. Do
Right.
that.
Yep.
So though, I mean, that's maybe not the most concrete answer of like, why does this happen? What do we need to do instead? But I do have a very, very strong stake in the ground for working with people who can actually see you.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, the platform builder, what was her line? She said an inch wide.
Your platform is the 1 square inch you can drill a mile deep in the market.
Yeah, that's what as you're describing this to me, that's it's what's coming up, because I feel like this is a perfect frame for leadership, because to me, leadership is you getting clear, feeling in your bones clear about the mission or the ministry, the square inch that you can go a mile deep in. And a lot of times, especially in this spiritual space where I feel like we're ahead of the curve, like the bell curve of humanity usually isn't where we are yet. We're feeling into things that aren't widely accepted yet as life coaches. So there is a feeling in your bones necessity to the square inch that you drill a mile deep in, that you won't find agreement from marketers or your family or your friends, even the markets you're speaking in, the posts you make, the message you share. Other people won't even know that what you're sharing is the thing they wanted until they interact with and resonate with your message.
Yeah.
That's all a leadership thing to me.
Yeah. I will add the marketing thing to it in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
The marketing thing to it is oftentimes when we go, okay, well, I'm just going to say what I'm here to say. We do it in a vacuum that where we don't, for our audience, build a connection to their current problems.
Yeah.
And so they don't see the relevance or the direct relevance between their problems and your solution.
Yeah.
And so they might go, oh, that's interesting, or I like to listen to it, or I'll read your blog post, but I'm not buying. Right?
Yeah.
So if we're really talking about the marketing side along with the leadership side, the marketing side is, what are the problems your people are experiencing because they don't have the solution you're here to bring? Right? So I'm going to use a slightly, generic and admittedly like, but if you're talking about the feminine rising,
sure,
right? Which is a real thing.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you are talking about that, go read Elizabeth Lester's book, Cassandra Speaks. It will blow your mind. And it's rooted, here's what Elizabeth did. She really did the scholarship. She looked at thousands of years of history around origin stories around women, the Adam and Eve story. Cassandra is a Greek mythology story, Pandora, right? And looked at what's the recurring pattern of these stories about what it means to be woman or feminine, and how that's related to our current society and the problems we're experiencing. right? So it's rooted in scholarship, speaking to a very real-time experience around, like, would we have this war in the Ukraine right now if the person running Russia was a woman? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, so years ago I had somebody who did this amazing relationship work, and she was like, how do I talk about my work? How do I explain it? And I was like, don't try to explain your work. No one's going to understand your work until they're inside of it. It's really far out there.
Yeah.
Right. My mom's cousin was an astronaut, and I was like, it would be like trying to explain the moon. Right. I don't care how much someone tries to explain the moon, until you've actually walked on the moon, you're never going to know the moon.
Yeah.
I don't care how much you try to explain the moon to me. Right. Like, and that's what a lot of us are trying to do, versus saying, hey, here's the challenge you're running into because you don't have this thing. There is this moonwalk for you, and it's available, right? You can enter it right here. Here's the issue it addresses and why, right? Here's probably the journey you've been on to this point that got you here. Here's all the things you've tried to do to probably address that issue. Here's why they haven't worked and never will. One of the I have a client in one of my programs right now who does this work around soul guides. So talk about like spiritual work, right? And what I love about her is she's snarky, and she isn't like just like love and light and just believe, right? Like, no, she's a questioner. She gets in the grit of it. She's done a lot of work around trauma and being trauma informed, etc. And she was, I like to ask people what pisses them off about their industry, because it informs a lot about where they sit in the market in terms of their positioning. And she was starting to rail about, in her own way, rail is my word, but well, law of attraction, it just tells you just to believe. And when you ask about questions about, but what about mass genocide? What about Ukraine? What about this and that in the world? Generally, the like law of attraction-y world says, don't ask that stuff. Just focus on your own vibration and you'll change the world. And she's like, I can't, like, that doesn't work for me. Because she's too connected to social justice and the needs of the world. Right. And I was like, oh, so I think a lot about off ramps and on ramps when it comes to marketing. I was like, you are post law of attraction. Meaning your best clients have to have already gone through Abraham Hicks and Mike Dooley and The Secret and like line them up, right? And have been asking the same questions you were asking and came up short. And are wondering where the hell to go from now. Right? Your people are the people who can't just believe, who've been screwed over by too many institutions and belief systems to be able to do this. They need to work with somebody who isn't going to require them to just believe, right? So that's the marketing side. Yes, you need to know where your 1 square inch is, but you also need to know where it is relevant to everybody else's 1 square inch. Where are the off ramps that lead to your on ramp, so that you can meet you're not meeting people on your own bridge, even on your on ramp. You're actually meeting them at the beginning of them exiting the other off ramps. You've got to speak to them there and show them just the first few rungs of that next bridge.
Right. And how, the question that's there, I know this answer. I want to hear you say it. Like what makes the coach valid to speak to that person's off ramps and their problems, the challenges they're bumping into? Like, who am I as a coach to say to that person what their problems are? just from the work I've done with you, I feel like I know the answers. Oh, maybe I'm stumping you here, but I feel I feel like there's a thing that makes us valid.
There's a number of things I could say about it. So there's certainly, we'll get into the wound answer to that. I will say though, before I go there, the leadership answer, I think, is because you decide to meet people there because you say so.
Yeah.
Um,
yes, I love that.
Because you don't ask for permission to.
Right.
Because you care about those people.
Yeah.
And because you've been them.
Right. 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 I feel like that's part of, I want to hear the wound answer too, but I feel like that's part of that whole thing is leadership is there's so many people right now seeking permission to do a particular work. And I think what is needed in the industry overall is I remember somebody had said to me years ago, if a building collapsed, you would start looking for who needed help. You're like, do you need help? Are you okay? You wouldn't be asking for permission or trying to get a certification in the moment of like, am I certified to help these people? You would just be like, are you okay? Are you okay? You just do. That's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to share a story before I go into the wound answer.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just like Mr. Story today, but what the hell?
Great. I love it.
So I had this woman on my podcast, and she was one of the very first female execs in corporate banking. So at JP Morgan Chase, I think in 1974.
Wow.
And she wanted to, so this is Neil Godfrey, who's the pioneer of many things. But one of the things she pioneered is financial education for children. Wow. And she did it because she went to the bookstore with her kids and said, hey, I want a book for, around finances for kids. And say, oh, we don't have any, there aren't any. Second bookstore, same thing. Third bookstore, same thing. Her daughter looks up to her at the third bookstore and says, Mommy, you should write it. She goes, I don't write it. She goes, what, are you scared? Game on for Neil Godfrey.
Nice.
So she writes the book. She's like, well, if I'm going to bother writing a book, I'm going to have it published by the biggest house. I'm going to go to HarperCollins. She goes to HarperCollins. They're like, we won't publish it. There's no market for this. Right. She goes, there's no market because there's no book.
Right.
They still won't publish it. So now, granted, we all don't have this next opportunity. So this is a little amplified compared to where most of us are. But what I love is the chutzpah of it. She goes and buys Macmillan, becomes chairman of the board for Macmillan. Guess who gets her book published?
Macmillan.
Right? Her children's book on money and kids called Money Doesn't Grow on Trees. All these lessons around money and kids, right? She ends up getting booked in Oprah. She ends up becoming the most frequent Oprah guest at that period of time. Wow. International bestsellers, right? Interview, she goes, yeah, and eventually just sold Macmillan. I never wanted to be in the publishing industry, right? Went back to HarperCollins, had them publish it, right? So, and then she's like, yeah, and then I opened the first children's bank. I'm like, oh, where'd you do that? She goes, oh, in W.A. Schwartz, the toy store. It's like, yeah, wow. How'd that work? How'd you? She said, well, I called up to the CEO and I told him I needed some square footage.
That's so great.
She had Princess Di at the ribbon cutting.
Right. Wow.
That's of course. But here's what I love is she's just someone who's like, game on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a lot of us can use a lot more of that game on attitude. I'll talk about power as related to that in just a minute, because that I think is a real underbelly around all of this. But who am I? So let's talk about wounds for a minute. Our lives trained us exquisitely and perfectly for what we're on earth to do. Bar none, always, with every single purpose and person. And so the way I like to describe it is that your wounds are like a slingshot. And if you think about a slingshot, however you pull the rubber back with a rock in it dictates its trajectory forward.
Mhm.
If you pull it back and down, it'll go up and down. If you pull it to the left and release it, the rock will go to the right.
Mhm.
Right? So our wounds are the same.
Hmm.
That however we're wounded dictates how we and how we respond to those wounds, send us on a very particular trajectory.
Mhm.
Right? When I talked to Elizabeth Lesser today, she's like, yeah, I had a very traditional dad who like, it's my way or the highway. And we were a house full of women. And I was the only one who said, who says why? Right? And like it sent her on this path of being a voice around social justice. And they were atheists, which sent her on the and made her feel very alone, which sent her on a path of spirituality. And and then she co-founds the Omega Institute, which is one of the premier centers for growth and development in our world. Wow. Right? Thousands of people with all the best luminaries go and teach there because of those wounds.
Yes.
And had she not had those wounds around power with that father and responded in that way, she wouldn't have ended up there and wouldn't have delivered that purpose. Right? So all of us have wounding. And when I talk about wounding, I am not mainly talking about the specifics of what happened. The specifics are helpful for us to get inside of it and explore it. But when it comes to connecting to our audience, it's often not the specifics, it's the patterning.
Yeah.
So, for example, in my own life, I've been precarious my whole life. I'm a little rascally. I ask why. I don't take a stock answer at face value. I've always been this way. Now, I grew up in the Midwest, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a evangelical, very right-wing Christian household. My mother was on the Republican, she was a Republican delegate, went to George Bush Sr.'s inaugural ball. Wow. Right? We used to go to Betsy DeVos's summer home to do fundraising. So, and then when I was 13, I realized I was gay. So I already felt like I didn't fit, right? We were supposed to just believe and be saved in where I was raised. And that never made sense to me. Some guy in the sky that I'm supposed to have some personal relationship with. And if I don't, I'm going to burn in hell for eternity. Like it, and you're not supposed to question it.
Right. Right.
So I always felt very alone. And then when I realized I was gay, I didn't tell a single soul for almost a decade. Wow. I just fought with God. I mean, I can still see myself in my downstairs basement bedroom, door locked, just like in despair because I'm going to hell and there's nothing I can do about it.
Wow.
Yeah. And the search for meaning and the search for belonging and connection, I was born out of that. That's what led me to my spiritual quest. Yeah. That's what trained me in having empathy for people's pain. That's what helped me not be afraid to go to the darkest places with people to find the gold and come out the other side. So all of my people, right? One of the things I'm talking about right now with folks is like, look, the world needs sense makers and way showers in a world that increasingly doesn't make sense. This world doesn't make sense, right? Like, and it makes less and less sense by the day. So who would be the sense makers? Who would be called to show up and help make sense of this world? Not by explaining what's happening, but maybe by explaining why it's happening and helping us see a new path forward. Well, it'd be, it wouldn't be the kids I went to school with that were all the popular kids and fit in, and that everybody loved them, and like that they seemed to have a great family, and they weren't queer in a Christian family, and like they didn't have to wrestle with sense making in the way that I think I and a lot of the left of center people that I work with have had to.
Right. Right.
When we see that, you know, Brene Brown says, until you own your story owns you. So part of this wound work is owning your own story, not as, oh, woe is me and it happened to me. And I think there's a time and place to do the healing work around it. Absolutely. What I'm looking for is the strength from it. Mm-hmm. What's the giftedness? How did it train you? What did it train you to know and see and perceive in the world in ways that most people can't?
Yeah.
Right. And who needs that from you, and when, and what's the context therein around when they need it? That's how we package it and market it and whatnot, right? That has you go, well, of course I'm the one. I was born, oh my God, my whole life prepared me to know and see this. I don't even have to question that I'm the one anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And we do that often, not by getting more credentials externally, but by looking at the credentials our life gave us. That's why I call it your life PhD.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the wound conversation around the who am I in my vocabulary.
And that's where leadership to me feels like it becomes a expression. Like you're not saying I'm a leader, but leadership is an expression of you owning and redeeming the wound. Like when you go, oh, this is who I am. This is what I'm for. Like you said, I think it was a couple of years ago, I had this thought, like, it's not, we do this personal work to heal it. And now I'm a healed version of the former me.
Right.
So how I move forward is always a survivor of the wound I healed and survived, rather than the creation of.
Yeah. I might say it this way. If you look at it in the hero's journey architecture, right? You called to adventure and you deny the call, and then you go on the call, and then you get the mentor and blah, blah, blah. But at the middle point, you slay the dragon. Mm-hmm. Which in psychological terms is going to your depths, facing your wounding, right? And actually embracing it and getting the gift of it, the gold, right? So in traditional mythology, the next step, the second half of the journey, is returning back to the tribe with a gift for the tribe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And in traditional mythology, the person that goes on the quest is outcast.
Right.
So the outcast leaves the tribe, goes on the quest, slays the dragon, or goes to the depths, gets the gold, gets the jewel, comes back with this elixir, a gift for the tribe. And so you orient yourself identity-wise, not as a survivor of the wound, but as the bearer of an elixir.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that.
So
does that connect at all to power? Because I know I definitely want to hear. I hear power in there, but I don't know if that's what you meant by that earlier. Is that?
Yeah.
Just talk to me about the power piece of that a little bit.
So the power piece for me is
where you wanted to go with power.
Yeah. A good number of years ago, I remember talking with a colleague who ended up hiring me after I mentioned this. And I just told him, look, everybody that's working with me lately has some hookup around this thing, which is, I need power to do good in the world, but somewhere inside of me, there's a hookup that power is bad. And guess what? The more influence I have, the more scared I am about what it's going to do to me. And we see plenty of examples of people who've been taken over by the power they end up being able to wield. And the sword ends up falling on them. We don't want to hurt other people, and we don't want to lop our own head off. So we tend, as a group in life coaching world, to shy away from it, to go, ooh. And maybe I left that world because it was corrupt and I didn't like those people. And it was all this games and all this power play and all this shit. And I didn't want to be part of it. So I left it.
Hmm. Mhm.
right? And now, oh crap, to have impact and to bring my gift, I need to re-embrace power.
Hmm.
How do I do that?
Hmm. Yeah.
So we need to have a new orientation and relationship to power,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
Well, first of all, I would say we need the scaffolding
Hmm.
to be honorable with power. In indigenous cultures, you go on rites of passage that usually actually have real danger as part of them
Yeah.
to bring humility to you
Hmm.
so that you can wield power honorably.
Right. Right.
So, we need that piece. I remember early in my career being at a conference with some colleagues, and I was just starting to work with Suzanne, and I was very like, ooh, I'm starting to be a somebody in this world, right? And
Yeah.
we were doing conferences and they were being sold out and blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And we're in the lobby of this hotel, and a small group, and there was a guy there, and I was kind of feeling into his field and getting some insight. And my ego said, oh, let me impress everybody.
Hmm.
And I shared some things. I basically gave him a unsolicited reading.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow.
Fortunately for me,
Mhm.
one of the people in that circle had enough love and care to take me aside afterwards and
Mhm.
say, hey, Jeffrey, he was not asking for that. That was in a public situation. That's not cool.
Hmm.
You got to look at that.
Hmm. Wow.
And I was so embarrassed, filled with shame
Hmm.
um, at first. And then I went and I had to go do work around that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, wow, that was my ego. That was my hubris. That was me wanting to be somebody.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so a lot of like my own personal work has been taming that impulse and doing the integration work around that so that I can be more honorable with power,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
Another one, boundaries. I cannot tell you how much of an issue that typically is for people that are very empathetic.
Right.
Guess how we developed our empathy, our connection? Usually we grew up in a household where boundaries weren't honored.
Hmm. Hmm.
And because of that, people were hurt, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, something where we had to read energy, see how things were, watch this and watch that to
Right.
not get hurt in one way, shape, or form, right? Especially if somebody's had sexual abuse, talk about a violation of boundaries.
Yeah.
And then we learn that we can't have boundaries and that there are consequences for setting them, right? You tell anybody, this is going to destroy our family,
Yeah. Right.
right? So reorienting our relationship to boundaries is another huge thing, even in our client base.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, a huge part of my journey as a leader, as a coach, has been discerning where my gifts are most valuable
Hmm.
and where am I no longer, where is it no longer appropriate for me to say yes to working with somebody?
Hmm.
And usually if I don't, I get my butt kicked. Right? The energy is draining. It's
Right.
hard, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things right now I have some just amazing clients doing some amazing things in the world. There was a day when I was driving around after work and I was on a high and I was like, wow, what an amazing day.
Hmm.
And it hit me like every single call I had, my best was elicited,
Hmm.
right? Just like, oh my God, like what they needed called for exactly what I've got.
Hmm.
And it made me realize genius is relational.
Hmm. Hmm.
For those of us called to be of service, we can never be in our genius while alone. I can't just sit here in my office and be in my genius. I'm only in my genius in relationship to
Wow.
people who are eliciting my genius from me.
Hmm.
And that put a new twist on really refining who your audience is,
Yeah.
right? Your niche,
Yeah.
who you like to go, oh, I'm looking for people who elicit my genius.
Yeah.
Not just people who I do good work with or that can pay me or whatnot, right?
Yep.
And so more and more, I just had a call before this with a prospect who I said no thank you to. She doesn't need exactly what I've got.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
So that piece, I'll add one more piece around this. And years ago, my guidance kept telling me, Jeffrey, you're here to help make power holy. And not every now and again, often my guidance gives me things like this that make me hurt. What the heck is that? What is power? Power being holy. And so I ask, and the answer came back, Jeffrey, power, holy power, is the complete expression of divine truth in real time without hesitation, manipulation, or control. In other words, I'm connected to forces larger than me. I'm listening and attuning to them and others in real time. And when I'm told to say or do or go somewhere, I do it without hesitating, manipulating. Here's a version of manipulation I see life coaches do. You get an insight. Now, this is not for someone that's not paying you or asking for it. This is for someone that is paying you and asking for it, right? Yeah. You get an insight and you go, oh, that is challenging to say that way. So I'm going to make it a little bit, I'm going to put a little sugar on it. I'm going to, right, I'll say it this way so they can, because wow, it feels uncomfortable to just say to have that sort of truth.
Yeah, right.
Years ago, I moved in with a colleague, and she had a little salon. The very first weekend I was there, I'd met her once. No, twice by that point, but only within a period of like 3 weeks. So I do not know this lady. And she's asking this small group like about her singing voice. And insight for like where her block is and whatnot. And I immediately get this message. She needs to sing from her vagina. Now, I'm like, am I really going to freaking say this?
Right.
I don't even know this lady. And I just moved into her house. Like, what the hell?
Right. Wow.
But I've trained myself enough in the right situations, right? Again, it was a situation where she's asking for it.
Yeah. Right.
To go, editing is not my job.
Wow.
It's also not my job to ensure, does it land for her or not? Is she going to receive it or not? Even is it true or not isn't my job.
Wow.
My job is to deliver it. Her job is to discern, does it land for me? Is it true? Can I receive it? That's all on her. My job is to be the delivery mechanism. Right. And that's what I mean when I say courageous messenger. That's what I mean. Right. Yeah. And she goes, oh my God, I had this singing teacher years ago that it was all about singing from your vagina. And oh my gosh. And like the whole thing opened up for her.
Wow.
Now, I've never heard of a singing teacher, and I have a degree in vocal performance. Wow. Right? I've never heard of a singing teacher teaching about how to sing for your vagina. Now I don't have one, so maybe that's the reason, but how could I have known that?
Right.
Wow. So that version of holy power, the complete expression of a divine truth in real time without hesitating, I'm going to sit on it. Manipulating, let me say, I think you need to sing from your power center. Right? Manipulation or control. I'm not going to listen to my guidance. I'm going to use my own. Well, guess what? I have a degree in vocal performance. Let me tell you how it needs to be. No, none of that. No. So that's what I mean by the power thing. And I think that a lot of the challenges I see for coaches aren't around doing more healing. Yes, there can be more of that, but most of the folks that I run into have done a ton of healing. And it's often not, or let me say it this way. It's often not healing around the ouch and the pain and the small parts, the young parts, whatnot. There may be some maintenance to do there, sure, but it's often more around power, influence, having a sharp sword of truth, saying what needs to be said, and standing in your own knowingness as you do it without looking for acceptance, belonging, etc. Are you going to like me if I say this? No, that is not your job. Your job is to be a leader, to be a way shower, and your job is not to attend to that. Now, this goes back to the alone thing, because if we have community behind us that sees us, that supports us, that loves us, it gives us that much more ability to do that out in the world, knowing you have a home to come back to.
Yeah, that's so good. Wow. This is super rich. There were so many, if I went back and listened to this conversation, there are so many points of leadership, and that's a great place to end, just on the holy power, and where I think what you described for us to do as coaches, that is leadership. That is leadership. It's not so much, I mean, there's the modality of healing and the things we've learned to bring wholeness to people. And then there's the sharp sword of truth and saying what there is to say and holding the space from a place of ownership and conviction, not permission and whatever, so thank you. Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was so good. I know you have your own show called the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show.
Yep.
So if people want to listen to your podcast, I imagine like by the time this airs, they could hear the interview you did with Cassandra. Yeah. What's her name?
Elizabeth Lesser.
Yeah. Elizabeth Lesser. Perfect. Yeah. And if people want to learn more about the work you do, or if maybe they're like, I really need to work with Jeffrey, I got to work with Jeffrey. Like, how do people connect with you?
Yeah.
Or learn more about you?
So there's a couple ways. So most everything can be found on my website, thecourageousmessenger.com. So you can find the podcast there. You can find different resources there. You can find how I work with people. I do, private work selectively with people. Sometimes I'll do a half day or full day. Sometimes I'll do a more long-standing engagement with somebody. I have a mentorship program that I run called Momentum. And then occasionally I'll run programs, on different topics related to marketing and leadership. So there's all that stuff. I also have a Facebook group, The Courageous Messenger. Nice. And every Tuesday I do kind of like a channeled message at 9 a.m.
Nice.
So, you can find me there and become a part of that community. So that's another easy way to plug in. And of course, the Jeffrey Van Dyke Show is on, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, also on my website.
Perfect. So good. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much. It's very generous share today. I loved everything you shared, and I appreciate you in my life.
Thank you, brother. So glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it, gang. Thanks for listening to this episode of Life Coach Labs. Before I let you go, I want to invite you to two things. One, there is a companion Facebook group to this show called Life Coach Labs. Go to Facebook and search Life Coach Labs. You can see it here on the screen. If I scroll through, this is a companion group to the show. Because it gives me a chance to get to know you. I want to know you as much as you listen to me and my guests. I want to know you. I want to hear about your important work. I want to support you. So please head over to Facebook and join the free Life Coach Labs Facebook group. Number two, let's jump over to the next window here. If you are looking to create recurring revenue in as little as 4 hours a week, I have documented my community model, right? How do you do community? How do you build a membership model for your coaching that incubates the people you want to serve and do it in as little as 4 hours a week? You can head over to lifecoachlabs.com/model. You can see it right here on the screen, lifecoachlabs.com/model, and learn more about how to create recurring revenue in as little as 4 hours a week. Thanks for hanging out with me in this episode. And until next time, be well.